Okay everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we got a good one. We're going to talk about if Europe is losing its relevance. Donald Trump just spoke with Vladimir Putin by phone about ending the Ukraine war. Guess who wasn't invited? You got it, the Europeans. The very people whose backyard this war is being fought in weren't even part of the conversation. That should tell you everything you need to know about where global power is shifting. For decades, Europe thought it was at the center of global decision making. But the world is moving on, and I think America's decided to push that move even faster. Today we're going to break down why Trump's call with Putin and the NATO meeting prove that Europe is losing its relevance. Do you think Europe is still a major player in global affairs? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more hard-hitting geopolitical analysis. Chapter 1, Trump and Putin talk, Europe not consulted. Trump didn't just talk to Putin, he talked about ending the war. And the European leaders, they were completely sidelined. This tells us two things. First, Washington and Moscow are the only ones that actually matter in deciding Ukraine's fate, which I think we already knew. Second, Europe isn't calling the shots. It's waiting to hear what happens next. This isn't just a one-time snub. This is part of a much bigger trend. Look back at history. During the Cold War, Europe was ground zero for US-Soviet tensions. Every major decision ran through London, Paris, or Berlin. Today, Washington and Moscow, they're going to handle this directly. Europe still thinks it has a seat at the table, but in reality, it's just another player waiting for America to decide what's next. And Trump, now that he's in office, I think he's pushing that agenda fairly quickly. Chapter 2, NATO. America tells Europe to handle its own problem. If you listened to Hegseth at the recent NATO summit, the message was clear. Europe needs to step up because the US is done babysitting. NATO was supposed to be a military alliance, but for years, it's really been an American defense subsidy for Europe. That era is ending. Think about it. The US spends more on European security than most European countries spend on their own security. That's insane. Trump has been hammering on this for years. America can't keep footing the bill for European defense. And now that he's back in office, he's going to make sure this is happening. The moment America signals that NATO isn't its priority, Europe panics. That tells you all you really need to know. Real power comes from self-reliance, and Europe simply doesn't have it. Chapter 3, Europe's dependence is a liability. It's not just military power where Europe is fading. Its economic and energy sectors, they suck too. Let's talk about the big one. Dependence. Europe is dependent on America for security, China for manufacturing, and the Middle East for energy. That's not a position of strength. That's really a house of cards. When Russia shut off gas pipelines in 2022, Europe panicked. And when China locked down its factories, Europe's supply chains broke. Europe talks a big game about being a global power, but it doesn't control its own future. Compare this to the US. Energy independent, militarily dominant, and rapidly restoring industry. Europe, the opposite. This is why when real decisions need to be made, Europe gets left out of the conversation. Chapter 4, America is moving on. While Europe is still stuck in Cold War era thinking, America is already planning for the future. The focus isn't on Europe anymore, it's on the Indo-Pacific. The US is securing trade deals with India, Japan, and Australia. This isn't speculation, this is happening right now. The US isn't just protecting its own interests, it's reshaping global trade and security without needing Europe at the table. Think about it. China is the real challenge of the 21st century. And where is Europe in that fight? Nowhere. If America is treating the Indo-Pacific as its top priority and ignoring Europe in key discussions, what does that tell you? That Europe's influence is shrinking fast. Trump's calling of Putin and the sidelining of Europe at the NATO summit make one thing clear. The world is changing, the US isn't relying on Europe anymore, and the biggest geopolitical moves are happening without European input. If this keeps up, Europe will become nothing more than a regional power while the real action happens elsewhere. What do you think? Is Europe still relevant, or is it fading into the background? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.